Yeah, when I got started back, about 9 years ago, I decided to go into the Class C and Class D low-end houses in Birmingham. And it was like playing Monopoly. You could buy these houses for 20, 30,000. And I just thought this was going to be a heyday. Nobody told me about the situation that new AC units are stolen rapidly after being placed, and vandalism is current, and don't put your appliances in until the house closes because they'll all be removed before that. And I mean, just the list of craziness. Nobody told me if somebody's killed on a street, nobody will rent on that street. Like, I don't live in that world. I didn't know these things.
Hey everybody, I'm Tarl Yarber. Welcome again to another episode of Fixated on Real Estate Experts Live. Today's topic is one that we all love, we all enjoy, and it's the number one reason why all of us get into real estate investing, and that is rehab and construction management. Now, I'm joking. None of us got into this business because of that topic. Yet, we find that the longer that we're doing this business, the more that we need to either have somebody on our team or ourselves need to become experts specifically on rehab and construction management, because it's what can make and break almost every deal that you do in real estate investing. So that said, we're going to jump in with our panel here shortly. We got John Knab with American Housing Alliance. We got James Dainard with Heat and Dainard. And of course, our perpetual guest, Mr. Jay Scott. All three of these guys are experts on this specific topic. And we get into a lot of things. We get into the importance of the scope of work and how you can even start making your own scope and your own budget template so that you can get more accurate budgets on the front end. And if you're not already doing that, you're going to find that is probably one of the most important things that you can build out in your business in order to get more accuracy and actually more profitability on your projects. We get into how to recruit contractors. We get into some of our toughest lessons that we've learned in this business, specifically on construction and rehab management. And we also get into a lot of other details, but one thing at the end that you guys are going to love is a nugget that you learn about how to prevent change orders and how to actually make it to where you don't get those anymore, or at least limit as many as you get. Because as you do this business and the more you're involved in it, change orders can make or break your entire profitability. So how do you handle that, and how do you reduce those as much as possible? And you're going to learn that specifically at the end of this show. So tune in, listen to the whole thing, get your notepads out, because there's a lot here, and we're definitely going to have to do another episode on this topic, probably multiple episodes on this specific topic. So here we go. What's up, everybody? I am Tarl Yarber with Fixated Real Estate, and welcome once again to Fixated on Real Estate Experts Live. Today's show is one for the ages. We are always excited to talk about our favorite topic as investors, which is rehab and construction management for real estate investing. It's probably the most important and most favorite thing every investor does in this business. It's why we all started in this business, right? James Dainard, when you got started in this business, were you just stoked and excited that you wanted to get in construction and rehab and know everything about contractors and contracts?
No. I did it because I did it because I had to.
Okay, Jay, you got started, Jay, because you wanted to know everything about construction, rehab, contractors, change orders, right?
I still know very little about any of that stuff. Hate it.
No. All right. Well, maybe it's John. John Knab, you got started in real estate investing because you wanted to know everything about construction, rehab, contractors, change orders, budgeting, and everything, right?
I thought it'd be a piece of cake. You just, stay on budget and get it done on time with quality. What's so hard about that?
What's so hard, right? Okay, cool. Well, I'll admit, I got started in this business because I wanted to make a lot of money. But I ended up having to learn about construction rehab. So today's show, we are going to talk about the one topic that most of us, it's kind of like a thorn in our sides. It's a necessary aspect of any part of real estate investing, which is construction, rehab, contractors, budgets, scheduling, all that great stuff. And I think it's what holds back a lot of investors from becoming successful in this business is not having somebody on their team or themselves and learning that component of real estate investing, which is construction, rehab, budgets, all sorts of great stuff. So we're going to dive deep into that today. I'm excited to have these guys with us. So let's talk about the panelists. First off, we got James Dainard, returning panelist. James Dainard with Heat and Dainard. He's co-founder and managing partner of Heat and Dainard and Intrust Funding. He's a seasoned real estate investor. James leads and develops development and execution of corporate strategies, marketing, and property acquisitions at Heat and Dainard Real Estate. His decade of experience, actually, you're going longer than that, of experience investing in multifamily and single-family units in the Puget Sound region has guided Heat and Dainard to over $200 million in sales and 385 transactions in just 2017. We need to update your bio. I've had this bio
We keep
since
saying
2017. I know. Send me a new bio, bro. James has done a lot of stuff with us. Like, so I have the same old bio forever. We need to update it. And James is one of the top minds in real estate investing in the Seattle and Puget Sound area. And that I can attest for. It is actually a true statement. How many units do you guys own right now?
About 400.
400 units in the Seattle area, but you guys flip and also help investors flip a couple hundred homes every now and then.
Yeah, we do about 300 flip deals a year.
Yeah, so a little bit of experience. So cool. Good to have you. Of course, we have John Knab. John Knab, this is the first time you're on the show. Welcome, John. We love having you. He's CEO of American Housing Alliance, one of the most well-run buy and flip full turnkey single-family residential entities in the country. Yes, it is. There are bigger operations than American Housing Alliance, but none are better run, averaging between 75 to 100 flips in multiple states each year. Mr. Knab loves mentoring those that are just entering the single-family industry. It is not often that you get to be a part of new asset classes, single-family rentals. Mr. Knab literally cashed in all his stocks and bonds and holdings, formed a self-directed IRA, and built a portfolio of SFR for his retirement plans. So he practices what he preaches. What markets are you in right now, John?
Birmingham, Indianapolis, St. Louis, Kansas City, and Chicago.
And you live in?
Salt Lake City.
You invest in places you don't even live in. So, and you're still able to do 100 flips a year. So,
and I'm not here to advocate remote management, but we'll talk about it.
We'll definitely talk about that. And of course, my bestie in the whole wide world is not with us. So I'll introduce Jay Scott, CEO and author. And he's author of Bigger Pockets, written every book Bigger Pockets has ever published. And he's CEO of whatever company he's running right now. Because I guess I keep saying the wrong company every show. He's also a perpetual guest who contractually obligated cannot be the host of this because he runs the Bigger Pockets Business Podcast. Entrepreneur, technologist, investor, advisor, host of the Bigger Pockets Business Podcast, author of 4 Bigger Pockets books, including the book on flipping houses, the book on estimating rehab costs, the book on negotiating real estate, and recession-proof investing. He's a real estate investor that's completed hundreds and hundreds of deals, flipped lots of properties, buy and holds, did lots of syndications, or one large one recently, which is super exciting. And he does everything. And writing another book that should one day come out as well for Bigger Pockets. And I'm excited to read that one. When is that one coming out, if ever?
Yeah.
One day.
It was supposed to be out this month, but we haven't finished it yet. So, and then it takes about 9 months once we finish it to actually
to go through the editing.
Yeah.
So for
next year.
So this is good. We're all very, James and John, I don't think you guys know this, but we're all blessed to have Jay Scott here because he literally wrote the book on today's topic called the book on estimating rehab costs. So this is an honor and a privilege.
That's Tarl's joke. He just wanted to say literally wrote the book on.
Yeah, literally. And I helped contribute to the second edition because my name's in it. And even though I didn't contribute at all, he just liked me and put my name in it. So, which I appreciate.
Okay, move on. People don't care.
All right, sorry. Okay, well, let's get into the topic. All right, so today's topic, we're going to talk about construction rehab management for real estate investing. And we wanted to start out. So we all joked just a second ago about how none of us got started in this business because we wanted to learn about construction rehab and work with contractors all day and change orders and headaches. But I want to ask you guys first before we get going. What is one of your more challenging moments in this business when it came to the rehab component of investing? And what kind of lessons did you learn from that moment? But just one big headache, one big problem property, one big issue that kind of happened that was actually a really good lesson moment for you as well in this business. And we could start from there so we can kind of get a feel for that. And James, I know you got tons of stories like this. So I'm just going to throw it at you. What's one of your worst ones, or what's one that, maybe the listeners can definitely benefit from, and we can continue from there.
I have headaches every day on job sites. That's just the nature of construction. If you're not willing to deal with the headaches and the issues, you shouldn't be doing it. That's just the reality. But the biggest thing I ever learned was actually when I was 23, I went from flipping condos to a big fixer. And, doing that big leap just because it was a really good deal that I was buying, I bought it. And without any real experience besides minor cosmetic work. So I went from taking baby steps to a huge leap. And the I lost all my money on this deal. It was it was I was a textbook investor that was in way over their head, didn't know what they were doing. I hired a friend. He said he could do it for 80 grand. He hired his guy's time and materials, turned into 175,000. Was supposed to be done in 5 months, took 12 months. And then also at the end of that 12 months, subprime mortgages went away and the market collapsed and I lost all my money.
Like all your
So, the biggest lesson I learned out of that was don't bite off more than you can chew, right? Like even if you're buying the best deal in the world and you don't know how to execute on the deal, you're not going to make money. You're going to lose money, most likely in a bad market. And so the lessons I learned on that was I never hire people on time and materials, especially for big jobs works. I don't buy stuff I don't know how to fix, just because it's a good deal. I don't get distracted by that. And I have to make sure that I have resources available that can execute these plans. Like if my resources are backed up and I don't know what this is going to cost, that's how my budget go in. So now prior to buying any deal, I budget out properties of costs that I know that I'm going to incur or that my tradespeople will do them for, to where I'm not going in this time and materials open-ended budget. But it was a very nasty learning experience. I'd say it was my $175,000 learning experience in construction. But I learned exactly how not to do the job.
Great lessons. Those are actually huge things. Don't bite off more you can chew. And, when it comes, especially when you're scaling up to the different, a lot of people, you see this in Seattle a lot, right? Where people get into their first time flip, and we have a lot of 1910 houses here in Seattle that are full craftsmen, and they're like, oh, I'm going to go flip that house. And it should just be a cosmetic remodel. And then they jump into it and it ends up being, instead of it's 50 grand, ends up being 200 grand because it's way bigger project than they could ever imagine because they've never done anything like that. So you see stuff like that all the time, especially in our market where we're at.
Yeah, they're old beat up houses. They need a lot of work.
They need a lot of work. So, all right, John, you got started because you watched too much HGTV, right? And you wanted to go flip houses. So what's a good lesson that you learned or horror story that you have to share for everybody before we get going?
Yeah, when I got started back about 9 years ago, I decided to go into the Class C and Class D low-end houses in Birmingham. And it was like playing Monopoly. You could buy these houses for 20, 30,000. And I just thought this was going to be a heyday. Nobody told me about the situation that new AC units are stolen rapidly after being placed, and vandalism is current, and don't put your appliances in until the house closes because they'll all be removed before that. And just the list of craziness. Nobody told me if somebody's killed on a street, nobody will rent on that street. Like I don't live in that world. I didn't know these things. And Class C world, Class D world, there's people that make money at it and there's people that are good at it. I'm not. Our company's not. We got out of it. And we hang out in Class Bs. Nobody told me about don't buy septic, sewage system properties, and don't buy swimming pools if you're renting. I had to learn all these simple basics. And we had a similar experience to James. We had a property that should have been a 50,000 rehab that tripled on us and tripled in time. And it's like, wait a minute, that can't be right. That can't happen. Like, how in the world did that happen? So
imagine if that was your first deal ever and you thought it was 50,000 rehab. And
this was early stage stuff that, probably this is way back in 2013. And I'm not saying we still don't have, challenges though, Tarl. It's just, those were the amazingly horrible moments.
Yeah. Really gut-wrenching, fun experiences.
Yeah.
Mr. J. Scott, I know you got a couple of horror stories you want to share. You want to share one in the lesson learned?
Yeah. Most of my horror stories are the same that we all deal with. It generally involves me screwing up and doing the wrong thing. We always talk about, hey, contractors are so bad and they screw us over or whatever. But 9 out of 10 times, what happens with bad contractors is we make mistakes. And as investors, it's our responsibility to make sure we're doing everything we can to mitigate those mistakes, either before they happen or when they happen, as soon as they happen. So most of my horror stories involve either me hiring somebody that I knew I shouldn't have hired at the very start, but because I was desperate to get a warm body in there, I hired them, or somebody that I knew I should be firing because they weren't doing the right thing, and I let them stick around for way too long. And then the third case, if I had to pick a third category of mistakes I've made, it's been not paying on a schedule that makes sense to me as an investor, and focusing on paying them on a schedule that makes more sense to them as a contractor. And all of these things, as much as I'd like to blame the contractors, they were bad. They didn't do what they were going to say. They did the wrong thing and then didn't get better. They took my money, whatever it was. At the end of the day, those were my fault. And so, yeah, there are plenty of bad contractors. I have plenty of horror stories out there. But the biggest lesson I think I've learned, and I think all of us need to take away from it, is that at the end of the day, anything bad that happens with the contractor is ultimately my fault, or on your flips, it's your fault, or whoever's flips, it's their fault. Take responsibility and do your best to mitigate any issues up front, and then solve those issues as quickly as possible if they occur.
Yeah. At the end of the day, you bought the house and you hired the contractor, right?
Yep.
And that's like, we all want to point that's one interesting. I like that you brought that up, because that's something that we've heard. I see it all the time on forums. I see it all the time on Facebook groups, like bad contractors, bad contract. Like, I think it's sometimes just being a bad investor too. Like, cause you can also be a very bad client to contractors. Like when they hire you, like, and how are you handling situations? Maybe it's an ignorant side on our end on how we're working with like the property itself, maybe we didn't understand what we really wanted, and we're changing our minds all the time too. And creating change orders in that way. So we're going to definitely dig into how to avoid some of these change orders on a future as we get into this show. For me personally, to kind of like bring it as far as an experience, is like one thing that's big. The biggest thing for me is that when I think I know everything I'm supposed to know in rehab and construction, because we've had enough challenges and experiences and failures and issues, all of a sudden there's something else. Right? We're like, okay, we have a process, we have an SOP, we have a standardized situation for how we handle our properties now. We're good. That we should never have any issues ever again, because we've had all the issues you can ever have. And then we get another one. And then something new again. And there's another issue, right? For whatever it is, because it's almost impossible to know everything. It's construction, right? Construction stuff happens, whether you like it or not, no matter how perfect your system is. It's just part of the business. Like, you can never have a perfect construction process, in my opinion, right? You're always going to have something come up somewhere. You might have one or two projects that are perfect, but like something's got to happen. Like there's something that, and you just got to accept that, right? And SOP is a standard operating procedure too, for one of the people asking that question. But I think my biggest thing is that we had, like, when we were really humming in 2017, we were doing a bunch of projects. We thought we had it perfect, and we never did sewer scopes, right? Ever, on any property that we ever bought. And I always thought it was a waste of $150 or $215 or whatever it is these days for it. And because we never had any issues with broken sewers. And then one day we had a major issue with a broken sewer when we went to go sell a house. Actually, it was a Heat and Dainard house, James Dainard, that we had bought from you, that none of us ever got a sewer scope on. And then when we went to go sell it, you guys were listing it, and then the spec sheet came back from the buyer, a massive break, like all sorts of bad stuff, and the house was like perfect. Ended up costing us almost $14,000 or $15,000 to fix that particular sewer, and this is years ago. And what I learned from that lesson was just like, okay, well, I need to start doing sewer scopes, but it's because that's a massive hit, right? And there's so many lessons like that. Biting off too much so you could chew, but that was a minor one. But that was one thing that kind of became a game changer for us later in the business, because now that we do lots of sewer scopes, we actually get discounts on our pricing, and we learn to repair stuff. Actually, I'm not even going to complain that we have a property right now that we just rented out that we did do a sewer scope, but nobody looked at it. And now we have a tenant in it, and the sewer's backing up because the sewer's busted, and we missed that as a company. So I guess we didn't learn that lesson fully. So I guess it still happens. Anyways,
and as long as you plan for a contingency too, you know, like if depending on how you're buying, like if we have a septic or a sewer and we can't see and we might think it's wrong, you just got to budget for it up front. Like, it's okay to buy it if it's broken and you don't know if it's broken. Totally. Just throw a big allowance in.
Well, it also allows you to get a discount. So if you find, I mean, I know we've gotten a ton of price reductions because we started doing sewer scopes. Yep. And making a contingent on it. So it's actually, even though it cost us a bunch of money on that one project, it saved us a ton of money later because we've gotten discounts on pricing on properties because it created a different process for us. So, all right, let's get into the nuts and bolts here. This is the big thing. So we have a lot of different people that watch this show. We get a handful of people that are brand new, and we get a bunch of people that are like, they're in the trenches doing it. And maybe they're not full time in real estate, but they're definitely like doing business, right? They're doing something. They've done a handful of properties. They're getting in the trenches. And then we got a few people that are like already run large companies and they like to watch this show too. So, but let's talk to the middle people. Let's middle ground. The people that are in this right now, the people that are doing single family properties and even multifamily. This kind of goes into both. And they're struggling. They're getting change orders. They're having a really hard time finding the right contractors, setting up budgets, getting accurate budgets up front, right? Clear scopes of work, all those things that we all know to do today, but we might not have known to do in the past. So let's get into the nuts and bolts of that, right? And some advice that we can give some of these people. So when we're starting a project, so when we first get a project in front of us, like let's just, for simplicity, let's deal with single family homes, right? Because we're all in that. And let's keep it really simple. Single family home. We get a project in front of us. What's the first thing that we're looking to want to do in order to analyze the rehab, the construction on that property? And what tools do we use today that help us analyze those rehab projects in order for us to get an accurate budget for the most part? Because I know that's a big thing for a lot of wholesalers and investors is like, how do I get an accurate budget, right? So let's start with Jay. Like when you first get a property and you're looking at it, what are some advices or what some tools and things that you do today to be able to get accurate budgets and start analyzing the rehab on a project?
So I'm a big fan of, if you want an accurate budget, you need what's called a scope of work. And that is a line item list of things that are going to be done on that project. I know a lot of people want to be able to cut corners and say, well, $12 a square foot should get it, or $18 a square foot, or a bathroom cost me $7,000. No, you really, if you want an accurate budget, you need a line item list. You go into a bathroom, well, how much are you going to spend? You have to replace the flooring, how much? You have to replace the sink, how much? You have to replace the cabinet, how much? You have to replace the toilet, how much? And you put together literally a line item list of everything. And then you assign a price, both labor and materials, to each of those line item pieces, and then you add them up, and that gives you the final renovation estimate. Now, the question becomes, how do you do that? Because that's hard to do. Here's a couple ways that I like to tell people to think about it when they're first starting out. At the end of the day, there are two things that are going to be on your scope of work, two lists that are going to be on your scope of work. There's going to be all the stuff that's broken that needs to be fixed. So these are things like your electrical panel is not up to code, or your AC is old and broken. Your roof needs to be replaced. Your garbage disposal doesn't work. Whatever it is, all these things that literally just don't work. And then the second piece is all the things that you should replace for cosmetic reasons or because they just don't look good. So cosmetic reasons. So then the question becomes, well, how do you determine what those two lists are? I like to tell people, for that list of things that are broken, bring in a great inspector. Spend $300 or $400, and the inspector is going to give you a list of functional issues in your house. He's going to tell you all the things that you have to fix because they're broken, and that's his job. And then for the second list, the cosmetic list of things you should do, that's when you want to bring in either a great designer or a great real estate agent, somebody that just knows how to sell a house, and say, hey, in this house, what are the things I need to replace? Do I need to replace the cabinets? Do I need to replace the countertops? Do I need to replace the flooring? What materials do I replace it with? And then once you have this list of stuff that's functionally broken that you have to replace, and this cosmetic list of stuff that you have to replace, you then go and you assign both labor and material costs to each line item on that list or those lists. And
is it that simple?
It's not that, well, it's simple. It's not easy, but it's simple. Yeah. So for the materials, I mean, you can walk up and down the aisles of Home Depot, and if I have a list, when I say I'm replacing carpet in the bedroom, I don't just put on my list, I'm replacing carpet in the bedroom. I'm using medium grade carpet with X pound pad, and I have to replace 125 square feet plus 10% overage. That's my line item for carpet. And so once I have that line item, I can walk into a carpet store and say, I need medium grade carpet with this pound pad, and I need 132 square feet of it. How much is that going to cost me? And now I have the line item. Then I call a carpet installer and say, hey, I need you to install 132 square feet of this type of carpet and pad. And how much are you going to charge me? And now I have the labor cost. So the key there is that I don't just say I need carpet in the bedroom. I have to be uber specific on exactly what I need, how much of it I need. And then it's not too difficult to get the labor and material costs for each.
Well, see, I mean, that seems like, I'm just going to throw a challenge out there on stuff. Like, that's a lot of work. Like when it comes to doing all that, it seems like, because like I know my side of the business, we don't do all of that. We don't do everything.
Well, that's why I make money and you don't.
Yeah, that's why I lose everything. But I know there's more than one way to do this. But for, let's say if somebody, like for me, when I was starting out, like if you told me to do all of that, Jay, like there's no way in hell I would have done all that. So I wouldn't even know.
That's why I don't have a lot of competition. That's why James doesn't have a lot of competition.
Yeah.
That's why John doesn't have a lot of competition, because a lot of people don't want to do the hard work.
Yeah, but why not hire somebody else to do all that for you? Or what about a general contractor? Can't they, measure that stuff out for you and tell you what the costs are and stuff too?
Absolutely. And the great thing about a general contractor is, by watching a general contractor, you're going to learn how to do it. The problem is, and I shouldn't say the problem is, that's great. I know there are a lot of people, especially I imagine John has either general contractors or partners that do this because he invests a ton out of state. James is at tremendous scale, so I'm sure he's doing the same thing. But at the end of the day, you need to understand how this works so you can manage the manager. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, you don't necessarily need to do this yourself, but you need to make sure it's being done. And in terms of who can do it, sure, a general contractor can do it. You can hire a project manager to do it. You can hire probably a personal assistant and teach them how to do it. But at the end of the day, somebody needs to be doing it. You don't need to be doing it, but somebody needs to be doing it.
So what I'm hearing is that somebody on your team needs to understand construction in some component. And whether you bring them on separately, it's yourself. Maybe it's somebody that you hire. Maybe it could be a trusted contractor. But somebody needs to understand and manage this side of the business if you're going to get in it.
And anything you do in your business, you either need to be great at, or you need to hire somebody who's great at it.
Got it. James, Mr. Dainard, let's jump to you. So you get a property, right? You're going to start out. You're going to start analyzing the rehab, right? What do you say to do?
So what we do, because we're more of a volume shop, so we have to kind of template things out. Plus, I believe the right systems and templates will really save you money down the road in costs and overruns. So what we do is we always start with our data set. How are we comping the property? What is that next value we have to get to? What kind of cabinets it does? What kind of countertops, like what Jay said? What kind of materials need to go into it? Because every different location, especially like in Seattle, we have 3 counties, Kingstone, which Pierce. They all need to be finished in different ways for allowances. So what we've done is we kind of broken down each area and price point, and we have 10 different sets of our budget sheet with has our install rates. I'll go into that in a sec, but they have different allowances set. So like in maybe Pierce County, if we're 300,000 or below, our allowance is set at $1.50 a square foot for flooring. Now in Seattle, because we might be $1.5 million to $2 million, our budget sheet is set at $3.50 a foot for materials. So what we've done is we've kind of broke down what our allowances for materials are, and then we have specs that go along with these as a template. So we know, hey, we can make this house look like the comparable inside these allowances. And then inside that budget sheet, so we have 10 different budget sheets with all these allowances.
Can we stop for 1 second? So, because Jay said this briefly too, but I want to make this a little bit more clear so people could hear it, is that you're analyzing this deal, and what you just said it like a few times, James, is you're like, what do you actually do on this property? It sounds like it's based on the comparables for the resale value or AR after repair value of that property. So you're getting comps and comparables to see what the highest and best value of that property is to determine what the rehab scope is. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. And that's the thing. It's like, you have to, for when I'm doing a project, it's not on my opinion. My opinion really doesn't matter that much. I mean, it does a little bit because I feel like I do know what I'm doing, but it's about what's the comparable data, right? Like if the house has wall-to-wall carpet, then I'm targeting that price point. I'm going to cut my flooring cost by putting carpet everywhere. Now, if the comparable has all solid hardwoods throughout, then I got to make sure I'm allocating the right allowances for that. And it's very key and fundamental that you go in depth through your comparable data, because I see people do that a lot. They're like, oh, it's worth $1 million. And my budget's this. It's like, well, no, that house has custom windows, custom cabinets. It's got $30,000 appliances. So your $100,000 budget needs to be $250,000. And so where we kind of change, so we have different allowances set because you can't build that out every time. especially when you're doing volume, you got to kind of know what you have to put in. And so based on what we're seeing we spent a lot of times looking at the comparable, each picture, we call the broker, we figure out what was going on. And then we choose our budget sheet with those allowances in there. Those allowances are based for those comparables already. So we already know the finishing product's going to get us to that exit number, whether it's low or high. And then what we do is, so we have all these allowances set, like, tile could be at $5 a foot at one house or $1 a foot at a different house. And so those are all set. And the hardest part really is going through your comparables, establishing those allowances, but then also figuring out what is that stuff going to cost to install, right? Because that's how you can logically break down a budget. So when we do a budget, we have our install rate and we have our allowance in there. And so how we come up with the install rates, because that is the hardest thing to figure out, is we talk to our tradespeople, right? We go through and, we're constantly updating, because in this market right now, especially with COVID, pricing has ripped up 30% in 6 months. It's really bad, which is materials. So we have to check those allowances. And then also the install rates, because there's a high demand. So for example, like what we do is I have 10 different electricians I work with. They're all within the same range. But what happens is these electricians start creeping their pricing up. And either I need to adjust my pricing or find a new electrician. As an investor, it is my responsibility to make sure I can execute on a house. Whether that's bringing in different subs so I can execute is up to me. So how we do that is we actually pull permits in the area for flipper houses, grab those open permits, call those electricians. Let's say I'm doing electrical. I pull an electrical permit, call them, talk to them, and then I go through my budget and I know what the stuff costs based on prior things. So and interview them and see if their pricing is going to meet my.
Okay, hold on. So all right, so that was a here we go, guys. If you guys missed that went pretty quick there. So you're basically also just, not only did you just say something about electricians, but you're saying how you adjust your budgets, where you basically pull comps in your area for people that flipped houses.
Yep.
And then you go get their permit for the electrical permits that they were pulled, find out what electrician pulled those permits. Then you guys are calling those electricians to find out like their budgets, their scopes, all that kind of stuff. But you're also prospecting new electricians, but you're also getting pricing of what's being charged in that area from other electricians.
Yeah, it blows my mind what people pay sometimes. I'm like, how are you going to be an investor and pay that much? Like that makes zero sense. But yeah, so that's a way for us to farm, right? The best way for us to farm is doing that and then networking with investors, right? Going to these meetup groups, talking to people, figuring out who works well, that kind of fits the model, because electrician is different in all ways. You can have a cheap guy, you can have an average guy, and you can have a really expensive guy. And so you got to focus on the guys that can execute inside what you're trying to do. Fix and flip, you have to manage your cost. If you don't manage your cost, you will lose money. And so, so what we do is we call them, and we already know based on what our guys were charging us, what our pricing is, right? So like in our budget, we know that our electrician charges us $2,000 for a panel. We also know what they charge per fixture. And that's the best way to logically watch people down, because not only do we have this budget sheet, but we're using the budget sheet to going into a project, but also to negotiate the contractors, because a lot of times electrician will walk through a house and like, $20 grand. They don't break it down. They don't give you any logic. They're just saying 20 grand. And then, and you can backdoor them into a price and say, okay, well, hey, in my budget, I'm at 12. I allocated 2,000 for a panel. Is that right? Yes or no? Yes, no, right? You get them in yes, no questions. If for per fixture, we pay $50 per fixture for electrical. That's high. I actually pay 25 and my budget sits 50. We know our Romex is $3 a square foot. So I ask these questions as they're bidding out the project. I'm like, well, hey, so I got $3 a square foot in for Romex. Does that sound right? Yes. Hey, I got $50 a fixture to install each fixture. Does that sound right? Yes. $2,000 in for a panel. Does that sound right? Yes. Trim out, it's $1.50 a square foot. Does that sound right? Yes. Then why is your bid at 20 grand? It should be at 12. And I show them logically how we break it down, right? And so when I call these new prospect or electricians, because I don't want to run 10 guys out there that are going to overbid me, we ask them all these qualifying questions and then document what they actually charge. And if we call 10 guys in a row and they're all 10% high, that means my budget's 10% off and I need to adjust my numbers going forward.
So now we went down a rabbit hole already, like, which is all good. Like this, I didn't pull you out of it because I think this is all great content. And so we're all of a sudden in that realm now, like how to actually like work out a budget specifically with specific subs, contractors, breaking it down. You're tracking all these dollars. And I think that's a good lesson that you're saying right now, is that like you guys are tracking numbers. You're tracking bids that you're getting. You're tracking what other contractors are charging. You're tracking what other investors are paying. Like you're tracking all that to figure out more accurately what you should be paying as you're going through it. And I think that's something that most of us have done, something I've done for years, which is we keep every bid we've ever gotten ever. Like it's in Dropbox folders and we can analyze what that stuff is. But you're trying to break it down to a minute thing to where like, what's it cost per outlet? What's it cost? And then Jay was saying that in another way as well. I think we've all done it. John, we're going to get to you in a minute. But at the end of the day, today, all four of us have budget sheets. Like all four of us have ways that we create our scopes of work to know what those costs are. But when we started out, none of us had that stuff, right? But it came over time, it came over energy, it came over effort, it came over hard work, like Jay said, which is why he's more successful than me, apparently. And to be able to get that scope of work, to get that budget, so now we can budget out properties better. Because the truth is, if all four of us, all of a sudden, if Jay, you gave me your scope of work and budget, I gave John my scope of work and budget, and John gave James his scope of work and budget, and we all just did this whole round robin of it, and we used those, we would fail, right? In my opinion, because it's my scope of work and budget for my business. It's Jay's scope of work for his business. And when everybody wants to share, like there's already messages going out there, like, can somebody just send me an accurate estimated rehab budget so that way I can just use that to be able to analyze deals? Yeah, it's just not going to work for you if we send you ours, right? So because it's unique to us or it's unique to our relationships with our contractors or our market or our houses we buy, right? Do you guys agree with that? Is that kind of how that works for the most part?
Yeah, I think we'll have similar like formats and, in logic behind it. Because I think anybody does this on scale has logic, but you just have to adjust your numbers for market pricing. People ask me all the time, well, hey, send me your budget sheet. I'm like, what's your market charge? You got to adjust all these install rates. You got to adjust all the materials. And that's more up to the investor to know.
John.
Yeah, I think.
Oh, sorry, Jay, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I mean, just like James said, there are going to be a lot of similarities. So we're all going to have flooring for each of our rooms. We're all going to have cabinets in the kitchen. We're all going to have countertops and toilets and a roof price and a line item for landscaping and all these things. And then the sub line items, the detailed line items are probably going to be pretty similar too. But the labor and the material costs are going to change. And typically speaking, for materials, the further north and west you go, the more expensive things get. That's just a function of most of the import ports are in the southeast. And so if you're buying stuff from China, you're going to pay more in the northwest than you are going to pay in the southeast. And labor prices are going to vary based on a whole lot of things. One, they're going to be very based on what kind of contractors do you use. If you hire a general contractor, you're going to pay more than that's using licensed and insured contractors. You're going to pay more than if you hire like a handyman from Home Depot that you have doing your plumbing and your electrical. Second question is, are you using union contractors? I've worked in areas where most of the contractors are union or the good contractors are union, so they expect to be paid a whole lot more. Or maybe you're in a place like California where there's so much regulation that insurance prices are through the roof, and you're going to be paying a ton for contractors in California because you're paying for insurance. And so, there's little rhyme and reason in terms of pricing, but the line items themselves, the components in the line items themselves are going to be very similar.
Absolutely. So let's go to a guy who's in multiple markets right now and has been quiet this whole time. Sorry, John. But we're going to jump to you now. So you can tell us if this is true or not, right? Like we're all saying, oh yeah, each market's a different cost. Each market's a different situation, right? You got to adjust for that. You're in multiple markets right now in multiple states. So tell us what you do, John. Tell us what's going on.
Are we right? I've been quiet because I'm learning. I didn't even think about going to people's pulled permits and seeing that was awesome, and a few other things here. Each person that's watching this is in different markets with different pressures to buy. Let's just take St. Louis, Missouri. It's pistol hot. You don't have long to analyze a house. It's maybe I'm exaggerating. It's hours, and it's tied up. So you don't want to just rush in anyway. You can't be tempted by timing to do a reckless buy. And if you don't know the pretty solid preliminary scope of work you're looking at, and if you don't understand the comps and a few other basics, it's just a sweet deal. I got to grab it. That investor is going to be out of business if that's how you're operating. You do have to let certain properties go. Simply, there wasn't time to do what needs to be done. So we do a preliminary walkthrough, and it's a scope of work that it's not as bad as Tarek on Flip or Flop, where he just walks around with his contractor. How much for that? How much for that? Okay, I'm calling the deal in. That's TV, Yeah. And I met Tarek, and I said to him, "You don't really do that, do you?" He says, "Well, yeah, we started out like that, but we've evolved." Well, we've evolved, and we're now, I got to say, we're completely anal with SOW, the scope of works. It is so detailed. I would have never dreamed 10 years ago that scope of works would be at this level of micro detail. And we even have I'm going to use St. Louis. We have a person in St. Louis. That's all they do for us is the scope of work. And you're going to think this is crazy, but it sometimes takes 5 to 7 hours to prepare the scope of work. That's a long time. And then if you don't buy the property, you just burned this person's 5 to 7 hours of intense labor, and his contractor's expecting the job, but we pass because of what we found. So we actually pay for the scope of work, even if we don't do the property. So if we pass on the property, we're paying the guy for his time. But we have guys that's what they do for a living. The one guy I'm thinking of, he's not really somebody you would want doing finished carpentry work or doing contractor type work. But wow, does he know every little thing as he checks out every little piece of the house. So we get these mega detailed scope of works. They have the item, it has the time it would take, the cost it's going to take, and it gives us a sense of how to decide. And we've also gone to a high level, really high level, 60,000 foot view of a rehab at $1,000 is a day of work. So 50,000.
That's the REO. That's the
30,
old school.
30,000 is 30 days. That was pretty high level talk, but at least it gives you some sense of what we're looking at for the time. And when we have this all wrapped up and bundled, it makes the decision pretty simple. And it's not simple getting there, but it's pretty simple to pull the trigger and go. And it's worked out really well. Now, it's taken us years to evolve to this micro scope of work mentality. We started out, like many of you watching this, where you're just winging it. You're just saying, 20,000, 30,000, 40,000, 50,000. And you've got a half a dozen or dozen major things that brought you to that number, and that's it. And then you get into it, and oh my word, you missed it. And you've heard some war stories when we started. All of us have war stories where we missed it by twice as much, 3 times as much. And that puts you right out of business. And so I'm pretty pleased right now with the detailed scope of works, the contractors in agreement on the budgets and timing. Everybody seems to be in sync. And then there's still stuff that hits, even with all that, like a cast iron stack, plumbing stack that's behind sheetrock. How do we know that it had a giant crack in it? How in the world, even the expert that's doing our scope, how's he going to know that? And he doesn't know that. And so there's those things. Or you pull the sheetrock away because you're tearing out a kitchen and there's huge termite damage that's destroyed. That wasn't in the scope of work. We missed that. It's a huge one, and we missed it. I loved your sewage one. Running the line, checking it, especially homes that have sat idle for months or even years. There hasn't been a tenant or an owner living in there. There's been no water flow. There's been nothing for a long time. That's usually a pretty suspect situation. And, so I just think that anyone getting into this business and you want to shortcut the scope of work, don't.
Yeah, it's just a matter, like I'm hearing it from all three of you. And actually even us too, going back to us, we do the same thing. We have a very detailed, many page scope of work template that we use every single project that we've built over years to get to the point to where it is now, and line it out. And we all do that now. And so, but we all started with like, I think it's this, right? And then we just go and we make mistakes.
Here's something that's worth mentioning. I mean, I'm guessing any of the four of us, and maybe not, it depends on how involved you are in your projects. I mean, John maybe never does this because he's smarter than the rest of us, or John and James are smarter than Tarl and me. I can walk through a house and in 10 or 15 minutes, I can get an estimate that's 90%, maybe 95%. But here's the thing, even though I can do that, it's not an excuse not to write a scope of work, because at the end of the day, one, I shouldn't be the one walking through my houses putting this together. I can do that, but I'd rather my project manager do that. But even if my project manager can do that, at the end of the day, we need to communicate to the contractor or the contractors what work needs to be done. And I'm not going to communicate to the contractor that list out of my head that I put together in 15 minutes. I still need that 5 or 6 page scope of work that is uber detailed, so that I know that the bid that he's giving me, that this contract that we're signing is based on something that's very specific. And then at the end of the day, when that project's done, the deliverable, the product that I get from those contractors is exactly what I expected. So we're talking, and just to clarify for the people, because I see some of the comments here, yeah, a lot of us can walk through a house and get a very detailed budget estimate without writing things down, without doing a 6-page scope of work. But even though we can do that, that doesn't mean we don't eventually do that work anyway, because our contractor is going to need it.
Well, let's clarify some of these steps so we can get more clear for those of people taking notes at home, and for what to do. So we've all said today, right now, we're all using our own scopes of work that we create. And you can have a general contractor or a contractor make the scope of work for you based on their professional opinion. You can do that, right? You can, and I did that for a long time because I didn't know what else to do, right? You can do what John's done, which I want to ask you, John, how much you pay that person. But like John pays somebody in certain markets to make the scope of work for them. And that's an independent third party, from what I understand, who's doing that because they're the ones that are boots on the ground. How much do you pay that person, by the way, to do that scope?
Around 500
to make a scope. All right. And so and you put that into, you do so many deals too. So that's a cost of doing the business, just like,
right.
Getting an inspection from so maybe not paying a home inspector, you're paying him instead or whatever. But you can pay a home inspector $200, $300, $400 to inspect the property for you and figure stuff out. You can pay a sewer scope, which is $200. You can pay the scope of work dude that you just said $500. So you might spend $1,000 analyzing a deal if you do all those things, and just have it be a cost of the business, right? But you get to a point to where you have your own process and your own system and we all have similar in some way to get to the same result, which is an accurate budget and accurate scope of work. And all four of us have said, we want our own scope of work, right? At the end of the day, we want to know what the scope is in detail. We want to have that scope. I know our next step on our process is we have the contractors bid our scope of work, not their scope of work, to get the numbers and stuff. But let's go back in time for a second. So what are some tips, just to clarify very simply, and James, I'll ask you this. If I wanted to start out as an investor, maybe I've done a few properties already. I've done a few single family homes, right? Or multifamily, but I don't have my own internal scope of work, right? What are some good steps to do to kind of create your own internal scope of work from starting today that you can start to build out as time goes on to where you could finally have one?
I think it does matter on what you're looking to do too. Like a scope of work for a flip property is going to be completely different in how you need to create that than a rental property.
I want to create a template. I want a template.
A template. So for us, I mean, I kind of look at things a little bit differently, right? A scope of work is actually what needs to be done to get the maximum value out of the property. And then the budgeting is how I come up with the actual numbers that go behind that. And so the things that I start with is material cost, install, and then really what needs to be done to the property, it goes into the scope, and that's based on comparables, right? So if I'm talking about,
you have a template. All right. So I'm sorry. Let's get,
let's do my budget template.
Let's simplify this, okay. Right? I know you have this, right?
Yes.
So I have it too, right?
Yeah.
I use Smartsheet. Like I advise everybody to stay away from Smartsheet unless you want to spend a lot of money time building it. But we use Smartsheet, and we have an entire. You can use Excel for this.
Yes.
We have every single problem you could ever have on a property categorized out based on exterior, interior, plumbing, electrical, whatever. Like it's all in there, right? Siding, roofing, everything. So that's our template.
Yeah.
And then over time, we've put a number to each one of those items.
Yeah,
right?
Correct. And so we the same thing. It's all built in Excel. It's very simple. I used a pivot table prior, and that was a nightmare trying to change that thing around. It was way too complex. So we actually got rid of that, and honestly, the pivot table was too granular too. So you got to make it in a way that you know what you're installed. So we have a list of everything, just like you said. It goes from exterior all the way down to, then we section out electrical, plumbing, framing, trash removal, dumpster, and it's all broken down, very granular. And how you build that, though, is you got to figure out what market pricing is. How you figure out what market pricing is, you got to work with the right team. So like even at Heat and Dainard, what we do is we coach people on what it should cost. How do we know what it costs? We do it and put the numbers in, right? And then we're interviewing people for it. So you start with an Excel spreadsheet of, hey, what's the install cost? What's the actual cost of the materials? And then that kicks you out your numbers. Then we put a contingency at the bottom. But then how we fill out that sheet is all based on whatever the comparable data is telling us to do. So, but yes, we have everything listed out in there. Plus, we always toss a 5 to 10% contingency on because there's always going to be something missed that we did not see at some point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, okay. So there we go. So if you're listening to this, like you can get this from people, right? Everybody wants our budget sheet, right?
Yep.
You can get a template scope of work online somewhere, whatever, that has like all the basic rehab construction components of a house, and then you could transfer that to Excel, right? And then from there, you've just put a couple extra columns on there saying like labor cost, material cost. That's the part you got to figure out. Like, is it price per square foot? Is it linear foot? Is it a square, right? Is it per fixture? Is it, whatever, like, and you start figuring that part out for yourself. And if you're just starting out, it's going to be a lot of work and you're not going to get it on your first house, right?
And don't just make up the numbers either. Call and ask people, right? Like just because Jay tells me flooring costs $2 a foot to install there doesn't mean that's what I'm paying. I have to call whoever's going to install the stuff and find out what it is going to be and then put that in my spreadsheet. Don't use other people's numbers. Like use the trades that you know, or find those trades and then put that number in. And if you can never buy a deal because your budget's way through the roof every time, then you're not executing right. Then go find better people because we're all doing this. So everybody can do this.
Also, Tarl, with the COVID, we've seen radical things happening. Certain markets, we have 6 weeks to get windows, 6 weeks. We've seen lumber go up 300%. I'm not exaggerating, 300%. We've seen lines at Home Depot in the day. They were only letting so many people in, including the pro contractors. You waited outside and waited forever. And then you go in only to find out they only had so many sheets of plywood or so much, plank flooring. Having that scope of work with the timing element has to be filtered and adjusted to these factors that showed up in 2020.
Absolutely. So I know James, you and I have complained a number of times to each other about how, like, man, my scope of work just sucks today. Like, I don't understand. Like, these numbers are crazy, like, as far as budgets and everything are concerned, because everybody's just throwing darts in the air of what things should cost. And sometimes there's no rhyme and reason for it.
Can I answer this question?
Go for it, Jay.
I've done this. What have we done? 30 or 40 of these?
I don't know.
I have a personal rule. I don't promote my stuff, but I'm going to break it today because I think it really is important.
I think you should.
I wrote this book because
I'm in that book.
You're in that book. Yes. Tarl's in
the
this
book on estimating rehab costs by Jay Scott.
Yes.
And Tarl Yarber.
Again, I apologize. I don't like promoting my stuff. That's not why I'm here. But when I started in this business, it was the hardest thing for me to do is to figure out how much stuff cost. And there was no book out there to do it. So I wrote this book. This book will not tell you how much everything costs. I'm going to start right there. What it will do is it'll lay out a methodology for you to write a scope of work and figure out how much everything will cost. And just like James was saying, there are categories. This lists out the 25 categories that I use, both interior, exterior, and special categories And then each of those, plumbing, electrical, roofing, whatever. And then the hundreds of subtasks under each of those that your scope of work is going to entail. And so I'm not saying you have to buy this book, but this is my methodology. And if you buy it from Bigger Pockets, by the way, you do get all the spreadsheets and stuff. So you actually do have the Excel sheets. So for anybody out there that doesn't know where to start, again, I apologize for promoting my stuff, but this is what I spent years learning.
I agree with all that. And I'll admit, I found Bigger Pockets because of that book. I was looking years ago when I left my business partnership and I had to take over my own company. I didn't have anybody on my team anymore that knew construction and rehab, so I had to go figure it out. I just started searching and Googling everywhere for construction rehab and rehab management and budgeting and trying to find it. And that was the only book I found that actually made sense to me. And that's how I found Bigger Pockets, was actually through that book. So highly recommended as well. It teaches you a methodology, right? That's what you have to, accept on that book, of how to create your own scopes, your own budgets, your own processes, that kind of stuff. So, all right, this is one of those topics, we're kind of hit a lot of different things so far. We got to let's narrow this down a little bit. So we're all telling you all you need to get a scope of work, right? We're all telling you all need to compare your properties based on comps, depending on if it's a rental property or a flip property or whatever you're doing. Right. We're telling you that you can do it through paying somebody like John to go get a scope of work made for you. You can go help go hire an inspector, right? You can get multiple contractors. But at the end of the day, as you build your business, you need to come up with your own template, your own sheet, your own budget stuff that you're working through. Are we all in agreement on that for the most part? Right. And you're still going to have issues that come up. So let's switch over. So John, you are in multiple markets. And let's talk about how to find good quality contractors for investors to work with, right? And I want to keep pointing that investors work with, right? Because there's a lot of great contractors out there, but they might not be the best for investors. So you're in multiple markets. You guys are probably having to recruit plenty of contractors all the time. What do you guys do in your business to find reliable contractors that you want to partner with?
So first of all, the word contractor is a noun, not a verb, and it is a very difficult assignment to find reliable contractors. I actually have documented our track record. I'm not proud of it. 5 contractors to find 1 good one. That means we actually thought they were good after diligence and had to remove them and move on from that contractor. So 5-to-1 ratio tells you got a tough assignment out there to find these reliable contractors. They are out there. My first piece of advice is the minute you have a bad apple contractor, you caught him in a major lie or a major fraud moment on some piece of the project, you got to take them out right then and there. Just remove them, gone. Because if you're thinking, well, I don't know who else I'd bring in. I don't know who else would pick up my project if I fire this contractor. I can't afford I want to bridge to the finding some. No, you got to get the bad apple out quick. It can bring you down. It can bring you down hard. So we're pretty fast on removing bad apples. Give me one piece of solid evidence that fraud was committed and you're gone. I respect these contractors. I mean, if you profile them, this is a horrible job. You've got a team of people and they're constantly being rated by other contractors because the demand in this country is off the charts. So if you have a finished carpenter and you're paying them $40 an hour, there's plenty of people that are going to pay 60, 70, and 80 for that person. So they're constantly being rated. Their people are constantly being pulled. Trying to retain them is a nightmare. And if you miss paying them because the investor didn't pay the contractor, there's not a lot of patience here in the contractor world. If a worker in a construction rehab isn't paid on payroll, within a day or two, they're gone and they're out of there. There's other reasons they quickly evaporate. And it's a very volatile environment. So we definitely want references on a contractor, and they can't say, well, I guess you could talk to this guy. I did a property for him a couple of years ago. No. I want somebody that you just finished a house for, just finished. I want to ask them tough questions. I want to make sure they're licensed. That's pretty basic. And then prove to me you're licensed. I want to see it. And then you have your own power of discernment. Don't underestimate you have a bad feeling about this person. That means something. And follow your gut of what it's telling you. I want to visit a property that's in active rehab that they're doing. I want to walk in on it, not by appointment. And I also want to see a finished job that they've recently done. And then here's my big question. I say, how many houses can you do at one time for us? What is your capacity? That answer better be quantitative. It better be specific. It better be something that's exact. And if it's more wishy-washy, oh, we can do any number of properties. Just give us
as many as you got. Yeah.
Yeah. Just give us the ramp, and we can do anything. As soon as I hear that answer, I'm out. Yep. I want them to tell me something. You can do 5 at a time. You can do 10 at a time. You can do 20 at a time. As soon as you get past 20 at a time, I'm suspect. I'm not buying it. As a matter of fact, I'm not really buying too much the 15 at a time. The country has independent contractors that are usually good for 1 to 5 at a time reliably, and that's probably the right answer. So,
well, I think what you're saying too is it's I love that, because I've been in multiple states as well, and what we found was that certain states, like, yeah, there's definitely certain states where contractors run good businesses and they could do 15, 20 at a time. And then there's states, there are none of those. Washington being one of them.
That's terrible. Terrible.
So, and like, we just know that. I just write flat out, like, we're not going to find somebody that could do 10 at a time or 15 at a time here reliably when it comes to it. But it goes back to, like, what is your state? What's your, licensing requirements? What's the, all that kind of stuff, and know that. So I'm happy you asked that question, because I've asked that question to a ton of contractors over the years. And they're like, oh, we could ramp up to any number you got, right? You're like, yeah.
And
right.
Here's the thing, 12 years ago when I started in this business, it was true. It's not true.
Not in Washington.
Washington, you have to know your state.
I would just say this. When you find a good one, you've got to make them a partner, and not legally. Just you got to be bundled with them. You got to be all in with them. You got to treat them with respect. If you've got bad news for him, let's say you can't get them paid on the time that you thought you could, you got to tell them as early as and work out something. You've got to be honest with these contractors if you want them to be honest with you. And you really do have to have an open, candid relationship where you get so much mutual trust going that you just share everything good and bad that's happening, and look for the long term with that good contractor. They are really hard to come by.
Yep.
James, how are you finding good contractors these days? Or is that an oxymoron? So.
What we've had to do is we've actually kind of got away from giving the contractors the full scope of work, because it just takes too long. So we do something called the bundle method, where we give a general 60% of the project, and then we plug in our really dependable subs. Like, we know our painter will show up on time. We know our flooring guy will show up on time. We know our cabinets will be installed on time. And so we kind of took away things away from them. So it's actually allowed guys to get more projects going, and they get to do what they're good at. And that's, but the general contractors in Washington is really tough. And the reason being, and that's where everyone should research what their laws are, because in Washington, just because you call a general contractor doesn't mean he knows any more about construction than you, right? It's like, to get in Washington, you file a form, you get a bond, and you are a contractor. Done.
$15.
Go fix this house for these people, right? Like, it is a joke. And so, but how we do it, referrals is the best way. I will cycle stock some things if I'm really desperate, and I'll just drive, literally stop by a job site, go talk to somebody. So if you have people working in Seattle, I might go talk to them. It just, because I want to get a gauge. And then usually within a 5-minute conversation, I can kind of tell whether these guys know what they're talking about or not. Like, hey, what kind of scope of work are you doing? How much was your bid? Did you get permits? If they're doing a massive project, they're like, oh, we have no permits. That's probably not my guy. right? Like you don't really,
some people might say, "Oh, that's my guy."
yeah, well, and you have to know what you're good at, right? Like people always are like, "Hey, how do I figure out this construction?" Well, know what you're good at. We do really big projects now in Seattle because our costs have gone up so much, right? We used to be the cheapest guys in town. I used to be able to turn a house for nothing. Now it costs me more, so I buy a different product, and I know they have to be like legitimate people. But to find them really driving job sites, investor referrals, and then again, see what flip houses have sold, find out who worked on them, and then go call those people because you can see their finished product. You can also pull when those people bought the property and when they sold it. Like if I saw you, Tarl, flip a house and it took 2.5 years, I'm not going to call any of the people that worked on your job site because why do I want that problem? Right. But if I see you do it in 4 months, I'm going to track down your people, which Tarl, I don't track down your people, by the way.
Yeah. No, you can have them all.
Yeah. I don't, if you're willing to give them away, I don't want them.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't want them? Well, yeah. Because we take a little bit more time. We're more lax. Jay Scott and I actually did a video on Bigger Pockets YouTube channel specifically on how we find contractors and stuff. You guys can also go Google search, YouTube search, whatever, to the Google Cave, that video. And it breaks it down for a little bit of some of our concepts. One of the things that came out of that, which that we still use to this day, is that we hire subs, like so our plumber, electrician, our cabinet companies, that kind of stuff. We ask them for referrals for general contractors all the time. And it's actually how we found some of our best GCs. One of our best GCs we found through talking to our HVAC guy. HVAC, for those of you guys that live in colder weather, is your furnace. So warmer weather is your furnace. And we found our best GC just from talking to our HVAC dude that's been with us for 3 years. And we finally decided to ask him, "Hey, do you know any good general contractors that'd be good, that what kind of houses we do, right? And so that you like?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, this guy Joe." And Joe does all our houses that we can give him, right? We love Joe now. And super simple, easy dude to work with, right? So sometimes asking other subs is a really good way.
I actually, people. Yeah, I like that method. So I don't use general contractors. I use project managers, which I guess sort of the same thing, but they're on payroll. But for me, like the one truism I've always found in this business is that great contractors make a point to only associate with other great contractors. The really good contractors aren't going to risk their reputation by hanging out and recommending bad contractors, because that just makes them look bad. So if you can find one great contractor, or when I find a great contractor, the first question I ask is, who else do you recommend in other trades? Who have you worked with on other projects that I should give a call to? And they'll probably recommend other great contractors. And then you ask them, "Hey, who have you worked with and who have you worked with?" And that's how I build my network. I focus on finding that one great contractor. And how do you find that first great contractor? Talk to other rehabbers in your area. I mean, if I lived out there, I would find Tarl, or I'd find James, or I'd find John and say, "Hey, you guys have been really successful. Give me 1 or 2 contractors that you aren't using 100%." Because typically, and there's another quote unquote secret in this business. Everybody thinks that we don't like to divulge our secrets. I'll give you all my great contractors, because if you're using them 100% of the time, you're not going to. But if I have a contractor that I'm not using 100% of my time, my window guy, my concrete guy, the guy that refinishes my pools, I mean, I'm not using them all the time because I don't have that many deals that I'm refinishing pools. I want to give them work, and I want them to hear, "Hey, Jay Scott referred me to you. Can you help me?" Because that way, the next time I call, they're like, "Oh, I need to help Jay because he always refers me out."
I fully agree with that. Like where, I won't refer out my number one general contractor, but we refer out our subs all the time. Yeah,
my painters, I don't refer out to anybody because they're 100% working on my projects.
I refuse to do that.
Okay.
Because you know what? Newer investors, I'm sorry, but they teach my guys bad habits. All of a sudden, they're paying them more. And I'm like, and then they don't want to work for me anymore. It's like I give them extra work and they're like, "Well, James, I want more," because some investor goes, "Oh, yeah, I'll pay you $4,000 for the panel." Why? Like they teach bad habits. Keep your bad habits out of my shit. That's what I do know.
And there's another good lesson. There's no right answer. What works for 2 of us might not work for the other 2. And so that makes sense to me.
I think that's why my
share,
plumber is more expensive now.
One thing that might help on the remote side, because some of you watching this are operating remote, because your market is too expensive to do the rehab. So if you've looked in the Midwest, anywhere in the Midwest, it's pretty attractive, and you'll want to probably get involved in it. Here's one thing I've found that's been helpful. There are title companies that have inspection services, and they provide that. And it's like 5 inspections for $500. And you schedule inspections on Fridays to go in on a project and see if the scope of work, the key dates that were set for that week actually happened. And it's video and picture proof. So I fly out often to our job sites every 30 days, but how about in between those 30 days? Inspections are a great way to go, and there's companies that provide these services, and nothing beats a third party showing up and walking a place, and the contractor teams know that there's no way to hide from anything they tried to, falsify.
Okay, let's talk about that. Like, I actually love that you brought that up, John, because that's quality control, right? You're basically, especially if you're a newer investor, like, how do you even know if they're doing the right job? Like, and if they're going on the right path and stuff. I know something that we did something similar to that when we were in multiple states, and we actually did that for a while, even in Washington, where we didn't go hire like third-party companies from like a title insurance company or whatever, but we would actually hire somebody to go take pictures weekly per market we were in, and they'd have to take 100, 150 photos, and they had the scope of work in hand, and they would just like look and make comments on the scope and then send it to us once a week, and we paid them like $50 every time they did that. But nowadays, because of places like Bigger Pockets and stuff, I can promise you guys, if you guys are listening to this, that if you had multiple projects and you reached out on Bigger Pockets, like, hey, who's in the St. Louis area that would love to drive one of my projects weekly for me, like that kind of thing, you'd have a ton of people that would do that for free because they want to go drive a project and take lots of photos and learn, right? And we would leverage the heck out of that today. But we've done that here locally in our Washington market. We don't do it anymore, but we have done that. And so you don't have to be the one that drives your projects all the time. You can have other people do it for you. I know when I would hire James Dainard and his company, Heat and Dainard, his agents would drive our properties and send us photos and stuff for us, which we used to do that with realtors all the time as well, to get that third party out of nowhere, dropping in on the contractor and, surprising them and so forth. But how do you guys handle quality control then? Let's talk about that. And as we start wrapping up this show, Mr. John, you want to go into that a little bit more?
Sure. So first of all, you do have that mega detailed scope of work that's backed by key dates, expectations weekly of what's supposed to be done. But what you're asking is, how is it done? What level of quality is it done? We speak almost daily, if not every day, to every project, to every contractor to get feedback. And we have those trust relationships now where if something went wrong, like, geez, John, I'm so sorry. And I gave an example earlier. This cast iron, stack behind the wall. We had some leaking coming down into the basement. We had no idea, what's this? We cut a big hole in the sheetrock, and there's a huge crack in this cast iron. So this is a job that's supposed to be done. We're ready for inspection. And he goes, I am so sorry. He said, I could have just dealt with this and not told you this, but I want you to be aware of it. So quality control comes from having honest, candid relationship backed by photos and videos of the expectation you set. And everybody's properties, whether they're C's or B's or A's, there's a different quality control standard. If it's a retail flip at $1 million house in California, that's a little different than a $150,000 house in Kansas City. But we still want to have the expectation met. And as soon as somebody lies to us and we're dealing with somebody out in the field that just totally falsified it, and this happens, you get photos that aren't the property. This is not the right photo, but it showed that it was done so they could get paid. Well, you can get away with that once, and then bam, you're gone, but it happens. So nothing beats the in-person inspection. So you folks that live close to your project, that's just the nirvana. I've never had that. I can't imagine how wonderful that must be. I have to rely on.
It's not that wonderful. Yeah. It's actually horrible to live close to your projects because you actually want to go drive them. So Jimmy, on your end, James, let's talk about change orders. And this is one of the last topics I want to hit. I mean, we're definitely going to have, for those of you guys listening, we're going to do more of these episodes because like, this is a big topic. Like there's so much with construction management and we've barely scratched it. Right. And if you thought you can learn everything in an hour and a half, sorry. That said, change orders is the bane, like the thorn, the thing that always upsets people when it comes to this business. And they start out with a $50,000 budget and scope and bid, and they end with $75,000 due to $25K in change orders. Like, I know on my side, we used to get a lot of change orders early on in this business. We don't get very many change orders anymore, but they still happen. So, and I've learned a lot actually from you, James, on this subject. So what are some tips and tricks to help avoid change orders or limit them in a project?
So the first thing you want to do is make sure you have a good construction contract that details out how change, like the scope of work, that it's all encompassing, and then also that how they deal with change orders. Like it has to be in writing with us, approved prior to them doing the work. So once they give us the bid, then what we do is we go out and look at the site and go, okay, is this a realistic number or not? Because change orders do happen. You do need to pay for them, but you also got to make sure they're not just blowing your budget based on it.
Hold on. Let's circle back. You skipped on something pretty quick.
Yeah.
About having a construction contract that specifies how to deal with change orders.
Yeah.
And why is that important? Because I know in Washington, there's like something bad that can happen if you don't have that, if the contractor just goes and does the work anyways. So why do you want that in that contract?
Yeah. So because in Washington, they can lean for whatever, right? You got to prove that they didn't do the work really. And so like in our contract, it's very specified out like, hey, if you're out, so our contract references the scope of work and their bid, right? And it all encumbers it together. In that section, if it's not missing from a clear scope of work, and that's the other important thing with that construction contract, you need a very clear construction bid, not just a bunch of typed out stuff with one lump sum number, right? Yeah. Everything needs to be allocated out. So on there, it talks about, okay, if it's going over a change order, they have to submit it to us in writing, via email or through a change or a invoice, and then it has to be approved by us in writing, not verbally. And if it's not approved in writing, we're not obligated to pay that. So it gives them a template to go off of. The reason you want that is because a lot of things are done on site verbally, and a contractor will be like, I'll fix this for $1,000, and then you get your change order, it's $1,800, right? And those little things can add up dramatically on the cost of your project. And so you want to make sure it's done in a logical way. And then one tip I have for change orders is when I get a call and they say, hey, we opened this wall, it's rotted out. Anytime I go to anything, whether it's a big deal or not, I don't act like it's a big deal. Because if you're in person with that contractor and you act like, oh, shoot, this is really bad, they're going to gouge you like nobody's business, right? Like I remember one time I was with a client, contractor calls me and goes, call me. So I call him, he's like, the house fell over. I'm like, what do you mean the house fell over? Literally the second story had fallen off. And I'm like, so what? Frame it up. He's like, because I knew he knew how to do it. I'm like, well, what's it going to cost to fix the framing? He's like, I'm like, that's not a big deal. It's just 2x4. You got to kind of walk him through that it's not a big deal. And all of a sudden his 15,000 went to 6, right? Like, I'm like, and so just never buy into that change order is that big of a deal, right? And then what we do is once they submit it to us in writing, if all of a sudden it says install new beam for 4,000, I'm going to ask him for his calcs, right? What kind of beam are you putting in? Well, I'm putting it in a glulam beam, an 18-inch glulam beam. Well, I know I can look online or call my lumber guy, and he's going to tell me that beam's $900. So the labor can't be $3,100 for you to install that beam. Or I'll ask them, say, well, how many days? Because you have to negotiate your change orders as much as you have to do your upfront.
If not more, because maybe they underbid the job, and they're trying to make it up on the change order, like to make the cost up. Yeah,
they're making you pay for it one way or another, right? And so that's why you always got to, even if you don't know, act like you know what you're doing, right? So it's okay. Well, I'll research the beam, and then I'll say, well, how many days is this going to take you to put in? 1 day. I'm like, well, 2 guys? And like, yeah, 2 guys. So what, $30 an hour times that by 8 hours, right? That doesn't equate out to $3,100. So help me out here. And so that's usually that's why we want it in writing, is to kind of walk it backwards too, because we don't want that change order totally jeopardizing our deal. Just because I'm spending more money on that house does not mean I'm going to sell it for more, right? And so we have to negotiate those just like we do our upfront bids. You want to make sure it's in writing, it's been approved, never do it verbally, like no phone calls, always in writing, because that phone call will cost you double by the time you get your invoice.
Oh yeah.
Tarl, we have a challenge with this subject because when you say the rehab's going to take 2 months, I tend to believe that means it's done. It's done in 2 months. It's done. Close the book. And what I'm finding is this creeps up. The change orders took the 8 weeks and slipped it out 2 weeks, which is a lot when you got a number of properties. And on top of that, not only did the change order cost time and money, but now the inspection generates a punch list. And I don't know why contractors universally hate punch lists. They don't want to do punch lists. They want to get on to the next big job. I don't want to go back to that property and do a bunch of punch list stuff. That drags us sometimes another week. So it's this change orders combined with punch lists and contractors that hate all of that. So all of a sudden the project can slip by 20% and you're not done. So my new rule is you're not done till all changes were made, all the inspections are done, and the punch list was completed. Now you're done. And that can take you 30% further than you thought.
And I think that final point there too is that making sure that it's clear that their final payment is when all those things are done.
That's right.
Because once you pay them, they're not coming back. So unless they're really nice and you have another job
for
them
until they're done.
Yeah, exactly. So your only leverage in most states is payment. So it's the contract that you have and the payment that you made. Now, on the opposite side of it, don't be that douchebag that doesn't pay the contractor when they should get paid too, right? So that it goes both ways. And I've talked to investors that are withholding payment just because they didn't feel like the guy deserved it in some way. I'm like, they did the job, like pay the money. So it goes both sides. But
and one tip that I actually just discovered not that long ago, one way you can kind of hedge against change orders coming in or liens after the fact, from what I know in Washington, if I put final payment on that last check, they cannot change order me and lien me later. So I put that on every final check. Even if it's not going to be a problem, I just do it so I avoid a change order or a lien later.
Yes. And unfortunately, some of those things come out. I do that same thing too, from bad experiences of not doing that and it biting you in the butt for some reason. Because everybody's great friends and everybody's happy as long as everything's going right on a job. And as soon as things start going wrong, when it comes to the contracts, your relationship with them, it's going to determine how quickly how well your friendship is with these contractors, depending on how well your contracts are and your relationship with them. So it's getting in and writing.
We can learn from the new construction boys. They have a pretty rigid $250 every single change order the homeowner wants. Without question, it's in the contract. And so you got to be really careful when you say, hey, I want to put an electrical socket on this wall where I'm going to hang a TV. I forgot to tell you. Everything has a 250. In our industry, we tend to be pretty lax about it. We don't have the same, the rigid standards that they do.
So if we had like this mentality as investors, knowing that if we don't plan out our project well enough in advance before we start the job, it's going to cost us a minimum of $250 for every change. So therefore, let's spend more time on the front end planning out the job before we get started instead of rushing into it. And on that note, let's go into our final thoughts and final share with people when we start wrapping up the show right now. And I'm going to start with mine, just so you got to get that, because it's like I was right on that point, which was I've learned over the years, like this is my final share for you guys right now, is the biggest thing that dramatically changed our entire business in rehab was us not starting the job, was actually us not jumping into it and hiring contractors super fast, was us not getting things and paying out and getting the job going as fast as possible. It was actually taking a step back and spending the extra time to plan the job out, the extra time to make a super detailed scope of work, the extra time to actually go get the schedule taken care of and figure out what we need to do. This eliminated a lot of change orders and also eliminated a lot of headaches later. We might sit on a project. My team's done this plenty of times, right? We've sat on a project 3-4 weeks before we even start it, just because we're just planning it out, right? And then once all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed, we know what we're doing. Then we let the contractors go. We have almost no issues like anymore. Like the project just does what it's supposed to go do. And because we spent so much time on the front end planning it out. So that's my final thought for people when it comes to construction rehab is spend more time on the front end, planning out your project instead of just rushing into it. Jay, what's yours?
Be detail oriented. I mean, this is one of those areas that if you are not detail oriented, you will get crushed. And so if you can't be detail oriented, have somebody on your team that's detail oriented, and ask for help. Because this is one of those things, this is the hardest part of this business, dealing with contractors, dealing with schedules, dealing with budgets, dealing with estimates. Ask for help and surround yourself with good people. And I mean, I see a bunch of people asking in the comments, they're like, what's the quick way to do this? Like if I only have 2 hours, if I'm working with a wholesaler and I only have 2 hours, I don't know how to do a rehab estimate, how do I come up with the number? And the answer is you don't. The answer is you practice now and spend the next 2 months practicing, walk into an empty house and practice so that when the time comes that you get a deal from a wholesaler, you actually have some experience and you're ready to do it. But it's not easy. It's hard. And this is the thing that's going to separate those who are successful in this business from those who either never try or who lose money.
Love it. Yeah, go practice. You don't have to go buy the house. Just go walk 15 or 20 of them and start pretending like it's your own.
Yep.
You don't have to be the one that bought it to be able to start practicing.
Yep.
John, what's your final thoughts and lessons and shares?
I'm going to go philosophical and say, make sure integrity matters in your operation and in how you operate with the people that you depend upon. America's Housing Alliance has been around 9 years. We've never changed our name. Do a scam alert on us online. You're going to see that integrity is important to us. And if you're going to be straight shooter, and you should demand that of who you work with, if they aren't, you quickly remove them. You don't wait. You get them out as early in the cycle as you can. There are good people out there. There are great contractors out there. It's worth it to find them and hang on to them.
And James Dainard.
I would say use logic when you're doing these things, right? Don't just walk into a project and ballpark it. Use logic. And then also, you got to manage your people, right? This is a business. You can't just rely on a general to fix your problems for you. You got to manage all these people and use logic, work with them. It's a team effort and push it through that way. But, you have to dig into the numbers as much on the construction as you do on the flip comps or the comps you're using. So,
Awesome. So last thing for each of you, James, we'll let you start. You get a bonus one, James. One, show everybody your tattoo that's on your left arm. And then two, how do people get a hold of you and get in touch with you?
Yeah. Do you want the tattoo for real?
Yeah,
you didn't even say anything about my Mike Myers.
Oh, I see that. Yeah, you got Mike Myers in the background.
I found that in the basement of a house. It freaked me out, to be honest. It's
Was it the birdcage basement?
There it is. Look, does that make me tougher?
Is it a lion? Yeah, it does. That's a lion. He's a lion.
That's what happens to contractors when they lie. If you want to look me up, my Instagram is jdainflips, JDAINFLIPS, or our company website is heatanddainard.com. And check out our social media. We're putting a lot of content and instructional videos out there. So, or lots of construction knowledge in that now.
James is throwing a lot of hot stuff on his Instagram right now. So for this type of topic, so check that out. Jay Scott, how people get in touch with you?
I'm going to make it easy. Connect with jscott.com.
And Tarl Yarber.
Connect with jscott.com.
Awesome. And John Knab.
Mine's also easy. The company name is America's Housing Alliance. So it's John at America's Housing Alliance. And I don't mind mentoring to a certain degree with people getting into the business and want to talk a little bit online.
Love it. And you can follow me at Tarl Yarber on Instagram, and as well as our company, Fixated RE, Fixated Real Estate, and go on YouTube. Check it out. If you guys are wanting to watch the replay of this, you can go to the YouTube channel, Fixated Real Estate YouTube channel, and watch all the replays of our last shows that we've done over the last number of weeks. and future episodes as well. And we do this every single week. So if you guys look out for your email, you'll have next week's episode. You guys can join as well for Fixated on Real Estate Experts Live. Thank you, James, John, and Jay. Once again, you guys are amazing. And we will talk to you again in the future because this subject is hot and we will deal with it one more time, I'm sure, at another date.